Almost 400 are now confirmed dead in Nepal's flash flood, with a warning that disaster could strike twice.
Oh my God, Mario.
Fresh footage shows people trying to outrun yesterday's deluge, sparked by the collapse of a glacier. Well over 1,000 are still missing, including dozens from Britain, as their families frantically search for them.
My wife, my mom, my brother, my uncle's missing. It's a very sad and sickening kind of feeling.
Now there are warnings that a lake created behind a dam of debris could burst, sending a fresh wave of water down the valley. Neil is in Nepal as rescuers race to find survivors there and in Tibet before catastrophe potentially strikes again. Also tonight, who'll mourn the butcher of Bosnia? Ratko Mladic, responsible for the ethnic cleansing of tens of thousands in the former Yugoslavia, has himself died. Is the head of FIFA a fraudster? UEFA's planning to take Gianni Infantino to court over his World Cup sell-off plan. Hundreds of police are sent to Middlesbrough amid yet more trouble following the car crash on the A66. And art loses the troubled yet talented mind of Yayoi Kusama, who achieved superstar status from her psychiatric unit.
The spots and vivid patterns that became such a hallmark of her work, she said, were based on what she saw, literally, as a result of hallucinations she had from childhood.
This is ITV News at 10 with Paul Brand.
Good evening. The terrible destruction and loss of life of yesterday in Nepal and Tibet may not be the last. There are warnings of another build-up of water in the same valley that was overwhelmed by yesterday's terrifying surge. It reached speeds of 100 miles an hour and swept away everything before it over a distance of up to 30 miles. Debris from yesterday is now blocking the flow of the same river. Nepal's Disaster Management Centre says the lake that is forming could burst at any time. The number of dead from what the centre called yesterday's tsunami from the sky is now approaching 400 in Nepal, with 1,500 missing there and across the border in Tibet. With communications down, both figures may be an underestimate in a catastrophe described today as beyond imagination.
The power unleashed in these valleys in a matter of minutes remains bewildering to behold. Part of a glacier and the debris it pummeled through these rivers left Nepal and Tibet scarred. So many lives lost, many others ripped apart. We watched as families of those missing came to hospitals in the capital, where many of the injured have been brought. 455 by mid-afternoon, searching for answers, but no one has them.
33 years old.
Krishna Thapa is looking for his brother. Bizay Kama works in a hydroelectric power station.
Just we get information and just we report it here. That's it.
His brother called him as the water struck.
Yes.
He phoned, you spoke to him yesterday morning?
Yesterday he called me.
At what time?
9 a.m. Yesterday 9 a.m.
And had he heard these reports of the water coming down?
Yes, flood is coming. That's why we are running away. And then no contact.
Families here and abroad are still desperately waiting for news. The Nepalese authorities say they've deployed more than 2,000 troops and have so far rescued nearly 100 people. As this bleak picture emerges, there is still hope and determination here. When disaster struck out of a bright, still morning, there was no escape for many. Survivors were wading through the thick mud today, searching for whatever they've got left. I've lost everything I have, Rajendra says. It was all swept away, only me and these clothes now. In the chaos, concerns are growing for some of the most vulnerable.
What we are hearing from the ground is concerning reports of children who have gone missing or remain stranded. Many children went to school yesterday in the morning, and in several cases, schools and homes are in different towns. The flooding has cut off routes between these communities, leaving children separated from their families.
This evening, they were still bringing survivors into Nepal's National Trauma Centre. Looking on, more families of the missing. Trauma etched on each face, and still no answers.
Well, a short time ago, Neil filed this update from Kathmandu.
Well, there are huge challenges facing Nepal and Tibet in the face of what has happened here. Some 30 miles of main roads which have been swept away, dozens of bridges just disappearing. We've got hydroelectric power stations which have been obliterated, others badly damaged. There is no communication in some of the worst affected areas here, and we've had some heavy rain here tonight hampering some of these ongoing operations. It's a complex picture. I think in the coming days we're going to learn much more about the reality on the ground in those badly affected areas. The Nepalese authorities, they're no strangers to dealing with the worst of what nature can throw at them. Think back to that earthquake here in 2015, but they need the world to hear their cry for help. This nation is one of the poorest in South Asia. The difference that aid and relief could make in the coming days and weeks is essentially the difference between life and death for many people here.
Neil reporting from Kathmandu a little earlier this evening. Well, the steep, narrow valleys below the Himalayas are no strangers to floods and landslides, but the collapse of the glacier produced a flash flood of a completely different order. Martin is here with the latest analysis and what may be coming next. Martin.
Yeah, well, Paul, the more we get satellite images, the clearer picture we start to build of exactly what happened. Let's start by looking at that glacier. This is before. We're going to put a circle on, and this is actually 700 metres across to give you a sense of scale. Now look afterwards. You can see the huge area here which has been washed away. Let's look again, this time from the side. Now this is the same glacier. We've highlighted the overhanging area of rock and ice. That's millions of tonnes worth. Afterwards, well, it's a bit blurry, but you can still make out, can't you, that collapse. The debris falling more than a kilometre vertically down into the valley below. And it was that impact that people originally thought was an earthquake. Now, experts are still trying to understand if the water was from the glacier and ice which melted in the avalanche, or was river water which got backed up by the landfall and then burst its way through. But either way, the steep valleys meant there was nowhere for the water to go. So the full force hit, well, here. This is the border point between China and Nepal. It's the border post. And look what it did. That white square there is the border building. You may have seen it being enveloped by a giant wave. And then you've got a hydroelectric power. That's one of dozens which was completely destroyed. We heard in Neil's report, didn't we, how workers at those plants are among the worst affected. Now, further down the valley, they'd have had little or no warning at all. The giant wave was travelling more than 100 miles per hour. Look at all the homes and buildings you've got lining the river all the way along, plus bridges, key infrastructure which link both sides of the valley. Now look afterwards. You can see those homes and buildings devoured by the floods, the bridges completely destroyed and washed away. It's believed at least 19 bridges have been destroyed, hampering rescue efforts, as are thick layers of mud which have been left behind. And experts say the danger hasn't fully passed.
So that flash flood itself has carried an enormous amount of debris. It's going to continue eroding the valley sides. That could potentially lead to secondary landslides, and those themselves could lead to blockages in the river.
And this is exactly what they were worried about. This is a brand new lake near the area where the avalanche originally came down. It doesn't look that big, but already it is half the size and volume as Lake Grasmere and will double that capacity in the next few days. At that point, according to Chinese authorities, the dam, which has been created by the fallen rocks you can see around here, could well collapse or burst, sending another flood down exactly the same valley. Now, the good news is engineers in this area are trained to deal with exactly this sort of thing. The difficulty is they're also trying to carry out the rescue, and they've got to get to the lake itself through some of the most challenging terrain on Earth.
OK, extraordinary images there. Thank you, Martin, indeed. Well, here King Charles has sent his thoughts and prayers to all those affected by the flooding. The Prime Minister has sent a message of his own and £5 million of emergency funding. A 13-year-old girl and 14-year-old boy are among the 33 Britons thought to be missing. For families from Nepal who live here and are worried about loved ones they haven't heard from, the uncertainty is unbearable. With communications virtually wiped out, one man is on his way to the disaster zone, desperate for news.
Pramod and his wife Sumitra got married 2 months ago. They are planning to start the next stage of their lives in Sussex together, where he owns a food business. But she is missing, as are his uncle, mum and brother. He has only been able to briefly call his dad. I spoke to Pramod while he was on the bus to the airport this afternoon.
I talked to him yesterday about 1 minute saying I'm coming home tomorrow. But my wife, my mom, my brother, my uncle's missing. It's a very sad and sickening kind of feeling.
Oh my God, Mario.
The term flash flood barely seems to capture the size and deadly force of the water that crashed through this valley. Certainty of survival for those who had time to run to higher ground. Many didn't. And for them, today the King has said, "My wife and I are heartbroken to hear of the devastating flooding. Our special thoughts and prayers remain with all those affected, and as always, the United Kingdom stands ready to help support those in need." A promise backed up by the Prime Minister earlier.
An offer of first responders, search and rescue support. Britain excels in this. Financial support has been put on the table as well.
Several hydro energy projects in the region, trying to use the power of the water, have instead been demolished by it. The connections of the Nepalese community stretch 5,000 miles to London.
Totally heartbroken. 4 or 5 people back from my hometown. All of them are engineers working in the hydro project sites, and all of a sudden it came, so they're missing now.
In temples and homes in the UK, they are responding to disaster in the most natural of ways, by fulfilling that human instinct, the need to be together. Ellie Pitt, News at 10.
Well, in other news now, the name Ratko Mladic struck fear into the hearts of millions after the disintegration of the old Yugoslavia. The Butcher of Bosnia, as he was known, was the general responsible for the worst massacre in Europe since World War II. Mladic's death in a prison hospital in the Netherlands was announced today. He was 84. As the head of the Bosnian Serb forces, he massacred 8,000 Muslim men and boys in one city alone.
Ratko Mladic, architect of some of modern Europe's most shameful moments. Here in Srebrenica, he assured Muslims that they'd be okay, and yet later many of these men and boys had been murdered by his troops. These were the horrors behind that gruesomely sanitized phrase, ethnic cleansing. Here, reveling in his own mythology, he enters a bus full of refugees. "I am General Ratko Mladic," he smirks. I know they told you about me, but don't be afraid, he tells the women and children. Nothing will happen to you. In Mladic's world, he was the sole arbiter of who should live, who should die. He commanded Bosnian Serb forces in pursuit of a greater Serbia. During the war, his troops besieged Sarajevo with the deaths of more than 10,000 people. They carried out massacres elsewhere. He went on the run for 16 years, shielded by his family in a farming village in Serbia. He was in the dock for 5 years, his trial at The Hague beginning with a throat-slitting gesture off camera. His time in hiding had not changed him.
Inappropriate interaction between the public gallery and Mr. Mladic.
It ended with his desperate shouts of lies and shame on you as he was expelled from the court.
Mr. Mladic will be removed from the courtroom.
There was always fury, but never shame. And yet for some of those who lost loved ones at Srebrenica, today is not a moment to celebrate. Manira's husband and 2 sons were killed in the massacre. Her frustration now is that the butcher of Bosnia didn't suffer for longer. He should have waited longer to die. He should have dreamt of our children's eyes as he complained. So I'm sorry that he died. He should have lived in his suffering under the pressure of his so-called heroism. He died today in precisely the place where many of his victims say he belonged, in a prison in The Hague. Rohit Katru, News at 10.
Yesterday, it seemed as though European football bosses were dialing down their hostility to FIFA President Gianni Infantino, reassured he'd abandoned forever selling off the World Cup. Today, they came roaring back, filing court documents to bring criminal proceedings against him in Switzerland over his secret sell-off plan.
The Champions League draw may have been centre stage in Monaco earlier, but it took second billing to UEFA's latest move to get rid of FIFA President Gianni Infantino. UEFA boss Alexander Seferin's lawyers have served papers in the United States demanding that FIFA provides all the evidence it holds around its secret World Cup sell-off plan. In the documents, seen by ITV News, UEFA poses the question whether Infantino's sale price was an arm's-length valuation of FIFA's commercial rights or, as the public record indicates, a fraudulently off-market price promoted by Infantino for his own benefit. Because FIFA is based in Zurich, it will be Swiss prosecutors who assess any evidence. If they bring the case and FIFA officials are found guilty of financial mismanagement, the consequences could be seismic.
If you're trusted with managing the affairs of someone else and then you mismanage them, you are potentially liable if you've done that dishonestly. That can attract a 3-year prison sentence if you're found guilty. But if you've done it for personal gain, which I know has been alleged here by some parties, then it can be a 5-year prison sentence.
Infantino, who received qualified support from the influential and wealthy Saudi Arabia Federation today, is currently on a whistle-stop global tour, shoring up support for his presidency. Despite continuing pressure, he's not going anywhere and plans to stand for another term in the election next year.
Manchester City.
UEFA have lifted their boycott threat of FIFA competitions after claiming the assurances they demanded were met. But it's quite clear their campaign to topple Infantino is a long way from over. Steve Scott, News at 10.
The latest immigration stats were welcomed by the government today. They show falls in most of the numbers. Applications for asylum here in the year to June stood at 86,000. That's down 21% on the year before. Of those, 34,000 were migrants who arrived in small and not so small boats, down 23%. And the number of asylum seekers put up in hotels fell to 16,000. That's down 50%. Well, Jasmine joins me to talk about all of this now. Evening to you, Jasmine. So, look, this seems as if it's good news for the government, which has made a priority of trying to bring this down. Successive governments, indeed, have made a priority of trying to bring down these numbers. What do you think is actually behind the fall, though?
Yeah, so as you highlighted, the general trend is that numbers are moving downwards, and as you'd expect, the government are keen to take credit. So, for example, the number of small boat crossings has fallen by around 23%. But opposition parties say, look, these numbers are still too high. And even as recently as this afternoon, some boats were filmed on the channel being intercepted by British and French forces. And as these pictures show, and as officials have warned, these people smuggling gangs are using more aggressive techniques, for example, filling these boats up more and more with people. Now, these images will be a very familiar sight to viewers, a very familiar sight to the Home Secretary, who argued that she's not complacent and says that the government has been putting in place measures to get to grips with the border. Migration experts say actually the reason behind these falling numbers is because of measures by Labour, by the Conservatives, as well as factors outside of government's control.
Okay, fast.
So it's not necessarily all about policy. There are other things that are happening. So, for example, there are fewer people coming into the European Union and claiming asylum there. And that may then feed through into fewer people eventually moving onwards to the UK. So it is likely that the government policies have had some impact, but it's certainly not the only show in town.
Now, over the summer, Reform UK and the Tories have been ramping up the pressure on Anti-Burnham over this issue. And certainly when MPs return after recess next week, it's going to be one of the many issues that many MPs want to grill him on.
OK, fascinating. Jasmine, thank you very much indeed. The phone numbers, car registrations, postcodes and emails of nearly 9 million passengers using Manchester, Stansted and East Midlands airports have been accessed by hackers. Manchester Airport Group, which operates all three, says neither passenger nor aviation security has been compromised by what it called a cybersecurity incident by an unauthorised third party. They say the information related to bookings for car parking, lounges and fast-track boarding. No banking or payment details were obtained. There have been yet more violent incidents in Middlesbrough today, which may or may not be linked to the crash in the early hours of Saturday that killed 2 police officers and 5 others. Police won't confirm either way. The first incident was actually just before the crash at a house on Ruskin Avenue, southwest of the town centre, which was rammed by a car at around 3 a.m. on Saturday. Less than an hour later came that head-on crash on the A66. One of the teenagers who died was the son of the owner of that house, although there's no suggestion of any criminality by the father. 4 days later, early yesterday morning, there was a house fire less than a mile from the crash site in which a 7-year-old girl and her aunt were killed. And just after midnight this morning, another house was rammed a few hundred yards from the crash site. And the trouble didn't stop there.
Fear, violence and armed police yet again in this now infamous pocket of Middlesbrough, and these scenes were only one part of a list of call-outs. The day starting for officers at 2 a.m. when they were called to reports of a property being rammed by a vehicle. Police saying once again they can't rule out links to organised crime or the other crimes seen here in recent days. Crimes that saw the loss just yesterday of 2 lives named locally as 7-year-old Valentina Foster and her auntie, Natalie MacDonald. Their deaths in a house fire being treated as murder. The devastation of their family and friends painfully clear this morning as they tried to comprehend what's happened. At 11 o'clock, officers on the scene here bowing their heads to observe silence for the 2 officers lost in a crash on the nearby A66 at the weekend. The speculation, the possible links, the theories around gangland violence all continue, and so does the worry for people just trying to live here.
It's unbelievable.
Do you feel like the police are losing control here? What's your...
Oh, yeah, I mean, normally you'd see them, years ago you'd see them walking about, but you'd never see one now.
I think for their own safety, they avoid things. The post office, you know, that was done the other night, wasn't it? You know, just people, you know, are not safe.
Just as we were filming, a call to another address where the air ambulance was called in amid reports a man had been stabbed. Neighbours say the male victim was set upon with a machete as he sat outside this property. There's no suggestion at this stage that what happened here is linked to the events of the last few days, but it all adds to that prevailing sense of the realities of what it's like to live around here right now. Just 5 minutes later, and only around 5 streets down, a different drama. Armed police raiding an address. The operation carried out by a unit from South Yorkshire Police. Little wonder MPs and others here are calling for more support to help fight crime here.
There are parts of our communities that feel lawless at the moment, that there is a lack of accountability, that a minority in our population, whether it's through organised crime or just general criminality, feel they can get away with things.
The Prime Minister responding, saying more help will be on the way, and that help for many trying to live, work or police these streets seemingly can't come quickly enough, as many here wonder, quite simply, what next? Greg Easteel, News at 10, Middlesbrough.
Some uplifting news now of love triumphing over evil, you might say. Today was the wedding of Emily Damari, on the right here, who was taken hostage by Hamas terrorists in southern Israel on October the 7th, nearly 3 years ago. She married her partner, Danny Amit. Congratulations to both of them. And finally, she became as famous for her bright red bobbed wig as her use of polka dots in her avant-garde paintings and sculptures. Now, sadly, the Japanese artist Yayoi Kusama has died at the age of 97. She was one of the great contemporary artists of this century and the last.
It felt like Yayoi Kusama lived in her own universe. Her art, a way of letting others in. Pumpkins and polka dots were her calling cards, alongside sold-out exhibitions of her mirrored infinity rooms. Before her death, she was the best-selling living female artist. Success achieved while living voluntarily for decades in a psychiatric institution.
Having broken into the art world at a time when it must have been incredibly difficult for a female Asian artist up against a mostly male-dominated world. She was very outspoken about her struggles with mental health, utilizing those things that could have been seen as setbacks and making them strengths, I think is worthy of admiration.
Born in Japan, she moved to the US, where she lived in extreme poverty, failing to find success, unlike contemporaries including Andy Warhol, who arguably copied her style. She returned to Japan and checked herself in.
The spots and vivid patterns that became such a hallmark of her work, she said, were based on what she saw, literally, as a result of hallucinations she had from childhood.
Her work was avant-garde, but over time entered the cultural mainstream, including collaborations with Louis Vuitton. Her bold, bright colours, instantly identifiable, became ripe for selfies in the social media age, and her story as popular as the art itself.
The 2021 exhibition was the most visited and the longest running exhibition in Tate Modern's history. She has encouraged artists and audiences to be more open in a conversation about mental health. I don't think that was always favourably received at that time, and I think it just goes to show that she was having the conversation before the rest of the world was ready to have it.
Kusama kept painting until her final days at 97. Even after my death, she said back in 2017, I hope that people can understand the purpose of my creations and my hope and passion for art. Her name might not have been familiar to all, but her art was everywhere, including outside London's Liverpool Street Station. She was a rare mix, boundary and stigma breaking, but with mass appeal.
remembering the artist Yayoi Kusama, who's died aged 97. And that's it for tonight. Ranveer and Adil are back in the morning for Good Morning Britain from 6, from News at 10 though. Good night.